Hi everyone, welcome to the Pet School YouTube page. I am Cole Harrington, and if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel and be the first to know whenever videos are launched here on the Pet School channel. So today we're going to be looking at highlights from Roxanne Stone's testimony in Keith Hill's ongoing lawsuit against her sister Jacqueline, and a group of independent farmers. So what I have done here, I have went through Roxanne's testimony from this injunction hearing, and I have highlighted things that are interesting that were either asked of Roxanne or that things that Roxanne has testified to. And this video is going to be educational for a lot of you guys out there to understand a little bit more about Roxanne, her job in formulating and running this company for over the past nearly decade or possibly more, and other aspects of the pet food industry that are often not talked about are going to be covered in some of what Roxanne testifies. So let's get to it. Roxanne's lawyer questions her. Ms. Stone, were you qualified by Attorney Sodomsky in Colorado as an expert on many of these categories? Roxanne responds, I believe so. I never read those transcripts, but he qualified me as an expert, I think, in food science and some parts of microbiology. I don't know if it included all of that. What feels very odd in this case is that the attorney representing Keith Hill and the company, Answers Pet Food, in this injunction hearing is the same attorney that represented Roxanne and Jacqueline, for that matter, when they were legally fighting the FDA in a different case. So all of a sudden, this attorney that was representing them at one point in time in their interest in the company is now against them. Her lawyer responds, got it. We didn't talk about the paper you published, but you published a paper on these issues? Roxanne responds, I did. She's questioned, peer-reviewed? She responds, yes. She's questioned, okay, I want to talk about Tim Ahern just a little bit. He's here today. You met him about 3 years ago. Roxanne confirms, I did. So you guys may recall Tim Ahern from various other videos here on the Pet School website where we covered how he lied under oath in one aspect when it was about a text message that Jacqueline had sent him. He was attempting to apparently make raw honey look bad when his own products have raw honey in them. And when he even admitted under oath that one of Cure's products is nothing like Answers Pet Food, when Keith Hill was and is still apparently trying to claim that they're identical. So Tim's an interesting character. I've referred to him as not the brightest bulb on the tree, and that is tongue-in-cheek, but that's who we're talking about right now. Roxanne's lawyer asked, when you met him 3 years ago, did you talk to him about fermentation or inoculation? She responds, as it applied to what we were doing in the pet food, yes. Did he know anything about it? She's asked. Roxanne states, I don't believe he had experience in that, no. During the 3 years he was at Answers, did you and Jacqueline teach him about fermentation? Roxanne confirms, yes, we taught him a lot about what we were doing with fermentation in pet food. Question then is, when you worked with Tim Ahern, the listed companies, did you ever have a discussion with him about the food safety plans and who would be the owners of those plans? Roxanne says, I did. So food safety plans, why are we talking about it and why do we care? Well, on top of the many things that Keith Hill and his team are trying to claim is that there are food safety plans that these independent farmers stole. And in reality, Tim Ahern was a consultant to Answers Pet Food. And my understanding is that he was hired to deal with certain aspects of dealing with the FDA and Answers Pet Food and the new Food Safety Modernization Act requirements. So he was there to perform a role there. And as Roxanne is testifying to here, it was important that the farmers themselves, since they were independent, own their own food safety plan. So now there's this jump from Tim assisting with and being hired to assist with or consult in the writing or crafting of food safety plans for independent farmers. He then invoiced for that because the farmers were going to own their own food safety plan. So for his advice or recommendations or assistance there, the farmers paid for that. And then, jump to the farmers are sued by Keith Hill. The farmers step away from doing business with Keith Hill because he's sued. Now Keith and Tim apparently are trying to say, you stole the food safety plans that are ours, when all along they're the farmers. That's the claim with food safety plans here and why they're being mentioned. The question is, what was the discussion? Roxanne states, we had several discussions on the farmers owning their own food safety plans, and we had both recommended or came to the conclusion it was best for them to own it. He then asked me, should I be invoicing the farmers for the food safety plans? And I said, yes. He's then questioned, when you said we, who do you mean by we? You and your sister? She states yes. So Roxanne, prior to becoming an owner in Answers Pet Food, consulted for Answers Pet Food. She had her own consulting firm. It was called Cascadia Food Consulting. Roxanne's attorney asked, when you left your consulting job to start with Answers, did you take a raise or pay cut? Her response is, I took a pay cut. She's questioned, why? You are now the second person to take a pay cut to join Answers, so tell us why. She responds, because I knew this was going to be a startup company. I knew we were all going to have to sacrifice. It was my family. We all kind of huddled and agreed that we were going to suck it up for the first 5 to 7 years because everybody told us startup companies aren't profitable for 5 to 7 years and, get used to it. So you're not going to be able to pay yourself very much. But we were all dedicated and committed and worked our butts off to make the company profitable. And I thought, well, in my retirement years, which is what I plan to do with the company, was retire with this company. Hopefully it will be profitable and I can suck it up now and take less pay and I'll get paid off in the end. She's then questioned, how much were you making before at either Jack in the Box or somewhere else? Her response is, when I left Jack in the Box, I was making $80,000 a year. Her lawyer asked, here's the big question. From the time that you started working with your sister until you left the companies in April of this year, did Keith ever assist you and your sister in product development as it relates to meat? Her answer is no. I would actually love to just sit Roxanne and Keith at the same table in front of a live audience and have the audience be allowed to ask any question they want in regards to formulation and sourcing and stuff, just so people can see in real life the difference between the knowledge each of these people have. But that's probably never going to happen. Did Derek ever make a formula as it relates to the meat? Was Derek an inventor of meat products? Her answer again is no. Who was the inventor? Who were the inventors of the process of making this meat? She answers, Jacqueline and myself. I think that was pretty common knowledge in the raw sector that the company was in. I think that's why so many of Keith's claims in this, that they stole formulations when clearly they had zero reason or need to ever steal a thing. They have so much knowledge and experience, it's not that difficult. So that's why a lot of his claims are adding up as shady claims. Her lawyer then goes on, tell the court, is it a static recipe or not as it relates to how the meat was made when you left in April of this year? Now this right here is fascinating. Listen to this. She responds, no. Every week, I would do the production schedule and the formula. Because we're a small company and we can't buy in huge volume, we had to source our raw materials, our proteins, from several different small ranches around the country. And that's sometimes hard to do. So every week I had a different set of raw materials like proteins, more or less, that basically 85% of the formula would have been that. So sometimes we would have certain amount of heart, sometimes certain amount of livers. Our organs would fluctuate. So every Sunday night I would write up my formulas based on the inventory that was in our system. And then Monday morning we would have a production meeting, and then Derek would often call me and say, oh, we don't have enough of this in our inventory, or the order didn't come in, it came in short. So I would basically There was a different formula every week. It was a base formula. It was a basic formula, but it might fluctuate 1% here, 2% there, 3% there, sometimes up and down. So it was never the same formula every week. Oh my word, wow, that's impressive. The question then is, okay, who else at the company besides you, when you were there, had the ability to do formulation as well as you? Her response is, I don't know of anybody that was doing it. Question then is, did anyone else do it? Answer from Roxanne is no, I never took in the 12 years I was there, I never took a day off from formulation. Not that I can remember, no. I never could have pitched it to somebody else and said, can you do the formulation this week? I'm taking a vacation. So even if I was on vacation, I would do the formulas. So the thing that stands out to me as I read that is, I believe in other parts of this case, I read that Jacqueline and Roxanne offered, and Keith rejected, but they offered, hey, we're stepping away from this company. We can work as consultants for a certain amount of time and help transition. We don't have to just step away and leave you stranded or anything. We're offering to help because, Roxanne's obviously testified to the fact that she was pretty much she's the only person doing the formulations and stuff. So Keith rejected that offer, yet in other aspects of the case, it seemed to be that Keith and his attorney was alluding to when retailers were upset that they were getting messed up product sent to them by Answers Pet Food after Jacqueline and Roxanne stepped away. There seems to be the alluding to that Roxanne, Jacqueline, or potentially the farmers had sabotaged product. Well, it's clear to me that once Roxanne and Jacqueline stepped away and Keith did not take them up on their offer to, transition off of them and have them help on that somebody took over at Answers Pet Food, potentially there's a high likelihood did not know what they were doing because obviously this is very in-depth and people sometimes could mistaken making pet food and grind some meat up and make it into a patty when it was more technical from a food science standpoint. So Tim Ahern never did formulations? Answer is no. And what's the effect if the formulations were done wrong? Roxanne states, well, if you had too much bone in there, that can constipate a dog if the bone's too high. So you have to be careful with that. So you only have a small percentage of window to get it right. If it's too low, they're not getting enough calcium and phosphorus. If your protein to fat level wasn't consistent and there were a change a little bit, you would have a little bit of leeway on your fat and protein. I would always try to hit it in between the 1.5% to 1% fat to 1% protein, so the fat could go up as far as 1.5% to 1, but we try to always get it in that range. Whose decision in the company was it that this company was going to be a fermented raw? Was it Keith's decision? Roxanne states no. Was it Keith's idea? No. Was it Derek's idea? No. Whose idea was it? It was Jacqueline's. Duh. When? Roxanne states pretty early on in the company. She said, I think that I want to have every component in our products to be fermented, and I thought that was a really good idea. My background was in dairy science and fermentation. There's a lot of benefit to that. So not only from a competitive inhibition and pathogen control, but from bioavailability of the product, increased nutritional nutrients, that type of thing. So I agreed with her. I thought it was a good idea, and we tried to perfect it over the years. Roxanne's then asked, there's been a lot of discussion in this case about whey being used in the products that Listen sells. Whose idea at the company was it to use whey? Was it Keith's idea? Roxanne states no. So whey, what is whey and why does it matter in this case? Well, whey itself is the liquid remaining after milk has been curdled and strained. It is the byproduct of the manufacturing of cheese. So why does it matter in this case? Well, Jacqueline and Roxanne, and they testify I believe Roxanne testifies to the fact that they first used kombucha as a way of introducing a fermented ingredient inoculation into their meat products. So the concept there was for pathogen control or inhibition. So simplified as much as I can, the concept was if you take their meat product and it sits on the counter and you got the FDA saying, well, this might have some salmonella on it. Well, if the meat product had some potential salmonella on it, the concept of using whey or kombucha or a fermented ingredient would be to stop that potential pathogen from getting out of control, because we're dealing with, again, food science and pH, and the pH of the fermented ingredients would basically not allow that pathogen to grow to an unsafe level, which when we're dealing with food law, would then be violating the law. So like this fermented concept would keep the food legal and safe. So she's testified that it wasn't Keith's idea to do that. Derek's idea? No. Tim Ahern's idea? No. Whose idea? Roxanne confirms it was Jacqueline's. And I think this is why this case is resonating with so many people, and why it's so sad to so many people is that it's very clear what these two women brought to, which is their own company, and how now everything they brought to this raw food sector in regards to simple concepts. I mean, fermentation has been around forever. How sad it is now that this now former husband, who's still CEO of this company, essentially is trying to strip them of their knowledge in some way. Like trying to basically say they can't compete on the market using their own talent and brains to do simple basic things such as fermentation, because he owns them. They're his trade secrets. That's the stuff that's not making sense logically in this case. Roxanne's then asked, when did you first become aware of the idea of using whey as a pathogen? I believe there's something wrong in the transcript here, or the question, or something, because whey is not used in this context as a pathogen. It's used as a pathogen inhibitor, so to stop it or control it. So it's not, the wording seems off here, but that aside. Well, we were using the kombucha, and we were actually pretty happy with the kombucha, except for 2 out of the 4 proteins were performing really well with the kombucha in, and 2 weren't performing as well. And that was the poultry products. And Jacqueline and I, we were getting early on a lot of complaints from customers that using whey in the poultry products and have whey for the chicken and the turkey and use kombucha in the beef and the pork. So that's when we introduced the whey. And then it was an amazing difference in the poultry products. We did not get the off odors, and we got a lot more feedback from customers that said their dogs were eating chicken now, and they were much happier with it. So that's how that got introduced. Can you approximate when that took place? Ballpark. Roxanne says, yeah, I think it was around like 2012, 2013. Her lawyer then asked, I think your testimony was that the people who came up with the recipe for the meat was your sister. What role, if any, did Tim Ahern play with coming up with the recipe for the meat? Not the regulatory in the recipe for the meat. Roxanne responds, he didn't come up with any part of the recipe for the meat. He encouraged us to increase the amount of whey in there, and I agreed with him it was time to do that. Question is, okay, what is the problem or not if there's too much whey in the meat? Roxanne says, well, if there's too much whey in the meat, you're going to have a sloppy mess, and you can't form a patty out of it. So you have to have a certain amount of moisture. So if you add too much whey, you're going to have too much moisture in the product. If you have too much moisture, you can't get it to perform the way it's supposed to, so you'll have a soggy mess. Her lawyer asked, that's a term specific in the industry, soggy mess? And she says, soggy mess, yes. Question then is, so the meat that was being produced by the listed companies when you left in April, how would you classify that? Can you write the entire thing down, formula, and it can be followed like there's a chocolate cake? Is it different every week? Is it exact science? How would you summarize that? Roxanne says, no, it's dynamic. It changed every week based on the inventory we had on hand. The question then is, well, why didn't you get the same inventory every week? The answer is because we couldn't. We were a small company. We had very high quality standards on our proteins. For instance, we used only grass-fed, grass-finished beef. So I can't just call up Cargill, who does grain-fed feedlot cattle, and get the products or ingredients I needed. So we had small grass-fed ranges throughout the country. Maybe they only did anywhere between 125 to 500 head of cattle a week. And so they didn't, and sometimes they would save it for us, sometimes they would save it for other companies, so it was impossible to get the same ingredients every week, every time. On some of the ingredients we could, like the static ingredients like montramilamite clay, typically, or vitamin E oil or eggs, were pretty standard, but the proteins, we vary especially on the offal. Question is, imagine any 10-week segment of batching that you did for the meat product. How many weeks would the finished product be identical, meaning really identical with the same amount of parts, same amount of livers? Answer is, I would say out of a 10-week period, none. They would all be slightly different. Question then is, and as a consultant for Cure, what is your role as it relates to meat? Roxanne states, I'd formulate their meat formulas for them. Question then is, okay, same question. The meat that Cure is producing that you're formulating today, is it identical to the meat that was being formulated when you were at Listen Companies? Roxanne says, no. The question then is, how is it the same? How is it different? Let's just do it on the different. Let's do that to save time. Roxanne says, okay, well, we're doing several things different. I guess the basic protein, trim, fat, ground, bone would be similar. The eggs are different. Question then is, how are the eggs different? Different in proportion, different in sourcing? Roxanne says different. I don't know if I want to say it out loud because we're doing something different than them. Question then is, okay, we'll move on. What else is different that you're comfortable sharing? She says, we're doing different vegetables. Question is, different types of vegetables? She states, different types of vegetables. So we're doing beets instead of carrots. Question, how does that change the consistency and how you have to formulate it? She states, it can be a little bit. Sometimes if the beets are a little bit drier, sometimes than the carrots. Sometimes if the beets are a little bit drier, sometimes than the carrots. One of the funny things is later on in the testimony, because we're at the end of this sort of testimony and the judge is sort of saying, we're coming to the end, you got like X amount of minutes. And Keith's lawyer is saying, at some point, will you cut this off, please, so I can have my fair share? And the judge literally has to tell Keith's lawyer, can you please allow me to run this? Ms. Stone, as an expert in food science and reverse engineering, do you believe that the information that was shared publicly would allow someone else with your skill set to reverse engineer the meat product that Listen Companies were selling to produce sustainably similar products? Roxanne confirms yes. So not that reverse engineering is specifically relative to this case or allegation that Keith is making, but what Roxanne's lawyer seems to be attempting to convey to the court is that anyone with a similar education or talent as Roxanne could technically just buy the food off the shelf, read the label, and figure out how to create a similar product, which is not technically illegal. You're not stealing someone's proprietary formula. You're doing something called reverse engineering and trying to replicate something similar. And this happens all the time in the human food industry and can happen in the pet food industry. So it's clear to me in this case and in testimony, I mean, really what Keith seems to be trying to claim is that your product is similar because it's using fermentation as inoculation, and I'm saying that's mine, when in reality, it's not. You can't own fermentation. It's like saying you own air. So Roxanne clearly had the ability and knowledge to formulate 150, 300, 500, who knows how many different products. It is her knowledge. So it seems to be that he's trying to say she can't use her knowledge to do anything else in the fermented world, which is why this case is so bizarre. Roxanne is asked, so why did you leave? She states, I saw the company becoming extremely dysfunctional. I saw a change in the leadership. I saw a change in my brother-in-law. She's questioned, that's Keith? She says, yes, Keith Hill. I saw him pushing his weight that he didn't used to. I used to trust him. And then he started fleecing money into his consulting gateway company, and I lost trust in him. I thought that he always had the best interest of all the family members, but then in 2019, I realized I was wrong. We went through a huge 8-month battle, and that's why we asked Alan Sodomsky and Robin Wirtz to come into our meetings, because we wanted help, because we could not have a functional owners meeting at that point in time. Question then is, what happened in 2019? You mentioned fleecing money. She answers, so in 2019 is when Keith came to an owners meeting and presented all the other companies to us. Keith's lawyer interrupts, Your Honor, I object to this. Now we're going to get into this. I can't cross-examine this in 15 minutes. I can't. There's too much information. We're starting with something new. I don't know what it has to do with what we're here for today, but whether or not CGC was fleecing money or not fleecing money, that's a separate issue. Is that technically a separate issue? Your client, Keith Hill, is claiming that they left and conspired to steal employees and formulas to start a competing company. And Roxanne is sitting here under oath stating she left the company because it appears as though Keith Hill was so hostile. It was an impossible working environment to be in, and he was apparently fleecing money into his own consulting firm, which I have to question, why do you have a consulting firm consulting a company that you own? Like, what are you consulting on? Like, and why do you have that? Why are you not just performing the duty as the CEO of the company that you own or part owner in? The judge states, I agree with that statement, all right? That's something that we can get into later at a different stage of the case. But why she left the company doesn't really, if you can explain to me why that's relevant, Roxanne's lawyer argues, I think it's relevant, Your Honor, because one of the tests for violation of fair competition is whether we're doing something just to harm the other side or whether we're doing it for legitimate business purpose. Roxanne's lawyer, in arguing to the judge, states, we tendered our shares in February, we filed in March, we left in April. They're claiming we did that with bad motives. What this witness, as an offer of proof, can testify is that she left the companies after doing everything possible to try and stay, but she was forced out of the companies because they've claimed that that's false. Their claim is that our statement that we were forced out are false statements, so it's important for us to show the truth of those statements. The judge says, all right, you don't perceive from your standpoint that you left after believing that you were simply forced out of the company. Is that what you would testify to? Roxanne states, yeah, I was constructively dismissed. It became so hostile and dysfunctional, nothing was getting done. Owners' meetings were completely dysfunctional. There was nothing happening. And so I saw a sinking ship, and I saw the vision of my sister's company imploding. And I saw a very disgruntled CEO that was using his 52% to jam everything down our throats. And we had absolutely no power in the company. And I needed to jump off that ship because I have a reputation in the industry, and so does my sister. And I couldn't support that anymore. And I wanted to stay with the company until I retired. This is my family. I didn't want to leave. That wasn't my choice. I was given no choice in this situation. And the judge states, all right. And then Roxanne's lawyer states, the 52%, what did you mean by that? The judge snaps back, I understand what it means. Roxanne says they have the majority. And the judge says 52% was the ownership interest in the company, all right? I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, Mr. Crossett. Is there one question that you need to ask to finish up before I turn it over to Mr. Sodomsky? And then Roxanne's lawyer says, Your Honor, I have more questions. And then the judge says, I know you have more, but we don't have enough time today, and we have to finish this up. And I said that as much the last time we were in here, and I said it probably 4 or 5 other times every time we were in here, that everyone who is handling this case was turning this into a 15-day trial, when in reality, this is an injunctive hearing. This got out of control really quickly, really early off the bat. And I cannot, in good conscience, and I think it's against my dictate as a judge, to push this out another 3 weeks before I can make a final decision in this case. And I'm not going to do it. So I told everybody that this was our last day. And this was even an overflow day. I wanted everyone done last week. Roxanne's lawyer says, I understand. And the judge then states, so with that instruction, you can lodge your objection that you've not been given an opportunity to fully examine your witness. But I'm going to ask you to sit down, please. All right? So with that, Roxanne did not testify any further or was not allowed to after this back and forth. And that's become a legal issue in this injunctive issue and appeal. So these were some highlights from Roxanne testifying in this first specific injunctive hearing. And I say that because there are other videos on the Pet School website relating to this injunctive hearing. There's going to be others relating to this injunctive hearing, but there's an entirely separate appeal to the injunctive hearing. And then there's going to be an entirely separate trial, jury trial, which I can't even believe is happening, but it is. And so we will continue to question and look at claims and testimony and continue to learn from this. So I hope these highlights were a bit educational to you as well. And I will continue to be questioning a lot that's going on in this case. And you can find that here on our Pet School YouTube page. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.